The other day, after making the video on making the mortises for the outdoor table, I had a couple people ask me about how I knew what size to actually make the tenon to reference the mortise off of. This is kind of a debated issue because one person might say you decide what size tenon to make off of one thing, another person decides to make it off of another way. So this is my opinion, I guess, as to why I choose the size tenons I do with what material I'm using, and it's usually just based off of the thickness of the material you're using. So I'm going to show you how I decide on what size to make my tenon, how to lay it out, and also a quick and easy way to cut your tenons. So for today, I'm going to be using a 2x4 just because it's simple to divide up and easier to show you guys what I'm doing because it's so big, and the waste cost is minimal because this is only $3 for a full one compared to hardwood and stuff like that. But this applies for any kind of wood that you use. For my tenons, I like to use the 1/3 rule for getting the width of my tenon. So that means that with this 1.5 inch 2x4, I'm going to be splitting it up into 3 sections, and then that middle section is going to be the width of my mortise. So as you guys know, 1/2 divided by 3 would leave me a 1/2 inch right in the middle. To begin with, I'm going to go ahead and use this side as the face of the project material. I've got a marking gauge that is set up for 1 inch away from the outside face of the material. When I use my mortising gauge, I'll be able to lay my furthest point out and then reference a 1/2 inch off of that. So I'm going to first use this, ride the fence along that 1 inch mark. After I went ahead and marked out that 1 inch spot, I'm bringing my mortising gauge over here, and I'm going to line the first point up with that line and then move the fence up to it to where it touches the outside face. The next step is getting the space in between the 2 points of your mortising gauge. So I've got my 1/2 inch chisel, which is going to be the width of the tenon, and I'm just going to lay that on there and then move that second point away from it, from the first one. Now that I've gotten the width of the tenon marked out, I would need to make how tall the tenon is going to be. This is simply doing it the same way. I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch on the top and a 1/2 inch on the bottom. One thing to consider though, that if this is going to be used at the end of another piece of wood that you're joining together, you have to be careful about blowout. So instead of stopping right here at a 1/2 inch, I might stop at like 1 inch to give myself plenty of room on the top so I don't cause any kind of destruction on the mortise side. So now I'll just simply mark out a 1/2 inch on the bottom and a 1/2 inch on the top side. So now you can see pretty much where your tenon is going to be. What I have always heard and what I try to do is always go 5 times the width of your mortise. So this mortise is going to be a 1/2 inch wide. That means I'm going to have a 2.5 inch long tenon. Of course, sometimes you can't always do that. Like on my outdoor table, if I had a 2.5 inch tenon, it would have stuck through the other side by over 1 inch. But for this purpose, we're going to go ahead and make this the 2.5 inches. So I'm just going to move my marking gauge to the 2.5 inch spot, lock it down. I'm going to pull this out real quick and run this all the way around. And now it's time just to go ahead and cut this. get the bottoms cut, I usually will saw the two sides to the proper length, and then I'll use a chisel to chop out the two sides. With this tenon, it's so big that I'm going to start about halfway in between the line and the outside edge. I got a nice knot right there. So here's the tenon. It is a 1/2 inch wide by 2.5 inches tall and 2.5 inches long. Now after you get to this point, you can create your mortise, and then you can do all sorts of different things. If you have a smaller piece that you're joining this into, this can be created for a through tenon, or you can leave it the same length and actually pin it into a mortise, and that thing will never come apart. That is actually how I built my bunk beds. I did locking tenons, or a locking mortise and tenon joint, where after I put the tenon into the mortise, I put dowels in between everything, so that will never come apart unless you actually cut the joint apart. The mortise and tenon joint is very simple to create and a very strong joint. I highly recommend you guys trying it out. Grab some 2x4s and just play around with them. It's cheap material to practice on, and then you can start moving into hardwoods. Now hardwood, I have found that it is a lot nicer, it's easier to clean up. Pine seems just to tear apart a lot easier, so you gotta keep that in mind when you're practicing with it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for stopping by and checking out how easy it is to make a tenon. If you guys haven't already, go check out how easy it is to make a mortise. Go ahead and share this video all around and give it a thumbs up. I'll see you guys on the next one.